I still remember the day we decided to explore the long-abandoned research facility on the outskirts of town. Our team, consisting of Dr. Maria Rodriguez, Dr. John Lee, and myself, had been studying the strange occurrences in the local folklore for months. The stories of the facility's dark past and the mysterious disappearances that followed its closure only added to our curiosity. We had obtained the necessary permits and were eager to uncover the secrets hidden within those crumbling walls. As we stepped out of our vehicles, a chill ran down my spine. The once white paint was now chipped and faded, revealing the rusted metal beneath. The facility's entrance, a large steel door with a sign that read "Authorized Personnel Only," loomed before us like a monolith. Dr. Rodriguez, our team leader, produced the keycard and swiped it through the reader. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit corridor that stretched into the darkness. "Welcome to Ravenswood Research Facility," she said with a mix of excitement and trepidation. We exchanged nervous glances, but Dr. Lee's enthusiasm was infectious. He had been studying the facility's layout for months, poring over old blueprints and documents. As we ventured deeper, I couldn't help but feel that we were being watched. The air inside was stale and heavy with the scent of decay. Cobwebs clung to the walls, and flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows on the ground. We moved cautiously, our footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. Every step seemed to take us further away from civilization and closer to the unknown. We reached a large door with a sign that read "Authorized Personnel Only." Dr. Rodriguez produced another keycard and swiped it through the reader. The door slid open, revealing a room filled with rows of old computer terminals and dusty research equipment. In the center of the room, a single, unassuming book lay open on a metal table. It was then that I noticed something peculiar. The book's pages were stained with an unusual substance, almost like blood. Dr. Lee's eyes lit up as he approached the table. "This is it," he whispered. "The lost manuscript of Dr. Ilara Vex." According to local legend, Dr. Vex had been working on a top-secret project when the facility was suddenly shut down due to an unknown incident. As we gathered around the table, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were about to unleash something sinister into our lives. But it was too late now. We had opened the door to Ravenswood Research Facility, and there was no turning back. As we began to study the manuscript, a sense of unease settled over us. The text was written in an ancient language, one that none of us could decipher. Dr. Lee's eyes scanned the pages, his brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, he let out a low whistle. "This is it," he whispered. "The lost writings of Dr. Ilara Vex." We gathered around him, our eyes fixed on the strange symbols and markings. The text seemed to shift before our very eyes, as if the words were rearranging themselves in a maddening dance. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that we were not alone in the facility. Dr. Rodriguez approached me, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to translate this," she said, "but be careful what you wish for. The more we learn, the more we may uncover." I nodded, my mind racing with the implications. As we delved deeper into the text, strange occurrences began to plague us. Equipment would malfunction, and disembodied whispers seemed to echo through the corridors. But it was what happened next that left me shaken. One of our team members, a young graduate student named Sarah, disappeared during a particularly intense session. We searched the facility frantically, but she was nowhere to be found. "Sarah," Dr. Lee called out her name, his voice echoing down the empty corridors. The only response was silence. As the night wore on, we grew more and more desperate. We knew that Sarah had been researching the text alongside us, and it was clear that she had stumbled upon something sinister. And then, just as we were starting to lose hope, a message appeared on one of the computer terminals. "Get out while you still can." The words seemed to sear themselves into our minds, leaving us with an unshakable sense of dread. As we continued to study the text, our findings became increasingly disturbing. The ancient language seemed to be a mixture of alchemy and mysticism, with references to an otherworldly entity known only as the Devourer. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes scanned the pages, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've finally found evidence of the Devourer." I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine as I read the words. The text spoke of an entity that fed on human fear and suffering, growing stronger with each victim. As we delved deeper into the manuscript, our discoveries became increasingly disturbing. We began to realize that the Devourer was not just a myth, but a very real presence lurking in the shadows. The more we learned, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The text seemed to be changing, rearranging itself in ways that defied explanation. Dr. Lee's eyes would light up with excitement as he deciphered new symbols, while Dr. Rodriguez grew increasingly obsessed with uncovering the secrets of the Devourer. And then there were the whispers. At first, they were just a faint hum in the background, but soon they became louder, more insistent. "Get out while you still can." "Leave now while you still can." I tried to ignore them, but the words seemed to sear themselves into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on us from the shadows. I looked around the room, but there was no one there. The whispers continued, echoing off the walls like a malevolent presence. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I realized that we had unleashed something terrible into our lives. And now, it seemed, we couldn't escape. As we continued to study the text, we began to notice strange symbols and markings that didn't seem to make sense. Dr. Rodriguez would point out a symbol here, only to have it change or disappear before our eyes. I started to feel like I was trapped in some kind of surreal nightmare. The words on the page seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, as if they were alive and trying to convey a message that I couldn't quite decipher. One day, while Dr. Lee was studying the text, he suddenly looked up with a look of alarm on his face. "Guys, I think we've got a problem here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "This symbol, it's not supposed to be there." He pointed to a small, intricate marking that had appeared on one of the pages. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. As we gathered around him, the symbol began to glow with a soft blue light. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel my skin crawling with unease. "What is this?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Lee shook his head. "I don't know," he said. "But I think it's connected to the Devourer." The symbol continued to glow, casting an eerie light over the room. We all felt a sense of unease, as if we were being watched by some unseen presence. And then, without warning, the lights in the room began to flicker and dim. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Dr. Rodriguez looked around the room, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," she said. "But I think we've triggered something." The lights continued to flicker, casting eerie shadows on the walls. We all felt a sense of disorientation, as if our very reality was being warped and twisted by some unseen force. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. We were left standing in silence, surrounded by an oppressive feeling of unease. The symbol on the page still glowed softly, casting an eerie light over the room. It was as if we had awakened something that had been dormant for centuries. As we continued to work on the ancient text, we began to experience strange occurrences that left us feeling unsettled and on edge. Equipment would malfunction, and tools would go missing or turn up in strange places. We started to feel like we were being watched, and the air was thick with an eerie, unsettling energy. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering in my ear. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but as I listened more closely, I realized that the whispers were coming from all around me. They were soft and raspy, and they seemed to be saying something over and over again. "Get out while you still can." I sat up in bed, my heart racing, and looked around my darkened room, but there was no one there. The whispers stopped as suddenly as they had started, leaving me feeling shaken and confused. The next day, we gathered in the lab to discuss our findings. Dr. Rodriguez was going over some notes when she suddenly froze, her eyes fixed on something behind us. "I think I've found it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We turned to see what had caught her attention, and that's when we saw it. A symbol etched into the wall, pulsing with a malevolent energy. It was the same symbol that had appeared on the page of the ancient text. "What is this?" Dr. Lee asked, his voice full of awe and fear. Dr. Rodriguez shook her head. "I don't know, but I think it's connected to the Devourer." As we watched, the symbol began to glow with an eerie light, casting shadows on the walls around us. We all felt a sense of unease, as if we were being drawn into some kind of dark and ancient ritual. The air in the lab grew colder, and I could feel the weight of history bearing down upon us. We knew that we had to get out of there, but our feet seemed rooted to the spot. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The symbol faded away, leaving us standing in an oppressive silence. But I knew that this was far from over. The Devourer was stirring, and we were right in its path. It was the dead of night, and the lab was shrouded in an eerie silence. We had all decided to push forward with our research, convinced that we were on the cusp of a major breakthrough. The ancient text lay open on the table before us, its yellowed pages casting a dim glow in the flickering fluorescent light. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, her eyes fixed intently on the symbol etched into the corner of the page. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the key to unlocking the Devourer's secrets." We gathered around her, our faces illuminated only by the faint hum of the lab equipment. "Doctor." Lee began to scribble notes on a pad of paper, his pencil moving with a frantic intensity. I watched as he worked, feeling a sense of unease growing inside me. This was madness, I thought. We were playing with forces beyond our control, but we had come too far to turn back now. The plan was simple. We would recite the words of the ancient text aloud and see if they would unlock some hidden power or knowledge. It was a risk, but one that we all knew we had to take. The stakes were too high to keep quiet. With a deep breath, Dr. Rodriguez began to speak, her voice low and hypnotic. In the depths of darkness where shadows reign, the words echoed through the lab, sending shivers down my spine. I felt a presence in the room with us, a malevolent force that was watching our every move. But we pressed on, driven by a mad desire to uncover the secrets of the Devourer. "The Devourer awakens," Dr. Rodriguez continued, her voice rising with increasing urgency, "and all shall tremble before its might." As she spoke, the air in the lab began to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, and my senses were heightened to the point where I could feel every molecule of air around me. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The The words died on Dr. Rodriguez's lips, and the lab fell silent once more. But we knew that something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in our world. We had unleashed a power that was beyond our control. As we delved deeper into the text, our sanity began to fray. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes took on a wild, far-off look, and her words became slurred and incomprehensible. "The devourer is coming," she muttered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own heartbeat. "It will consume us all, Doctor." Lee's face contorted in a mixture of fear and fascination as he read on. His eyes scanned the page with an intense, almost desperate focus, as if searching for some hidden truth that would set him free. But the more he read, the more his words seemed to slow and stutter, as if the text was draining him of his very life force. I tried to intervene, but my own words were lost in a torrent of madness. "Stop," I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're going too far," but Dr. Rodriguez just laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Too far," she repeated, her eyes glinting with a mad light. "We've only just begun to scratch the surface of the devourer's secrets." As the night wore on, our behavior became increasingly erratic. We spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid of being overheard by some unseen presence. We moved through the lab with a sense of zombie-like numbness, our feet carrying us towards some unknown destiny without our conscious consent. It was then that I realized we were no longer a team. We had become individuals, lost in our own private hells of madness and despair. And at the center of it all, Dr. Rodriguez sat like a queen, her eyes blazing with an otherworldly power that seemed to draw us inexorably towards the abyss. The lab was descending into chaos. Dr. Rodriguez sat at the center, her eyes blazing with an otherworldly energy. But it wasn't just her that seemed to be driving us mad. Disembodied screams and whispers seemed to be coming from all directions. I swear I heard my own name being called out in a voice that wasn't my own. "Emily," the voice whispered. "Emily, is that you?" I spun around, but there was no one there. The other team members were similarly entranced, their eyes fixed on Dr. Rodriguez as if they were under some sort of spell. "What's going on?" Dr. Lee asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But Dr. Rodriguez just laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent shivers down my spine. "The devourer is awakening," she repeated, her eyes gleaming with an evil light. "And you're all invited to the party." The whispers grew louder, more urgent. I could feel the air vibrating with an otherworldly energy. It was like we were being pulled into some sort of dark vortex, and there was no escape. I tried to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The screams grew louder still, until it felt like my very eardrums were going to burst. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The whispers died away, the screams ceased, and in the sudden silence, I could have sworn I heard Dr. Rodriguez's voice whispering a single word in my ear: "Welcome." As the days passed, our isolation became increasingly suffocating. We were trapped in the lab, with no escape from the madness that seemed to be closing in around us. Dr. Rodriguez's behavior had become more erratic by the hour, her eyes taking on a wild, unhinged look that made me shudder. "We have to know the truth," she would repeat, over and over again, like a mantra. "We have to uncover the secrets of the devourer." But as we delved deeper into the text, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing with fire. Every step we took brought us closer to some unknown precipice, and I couldn't help but wonder if we'd ever be able to escape the abyss we'd unleashed. Dr. Lee was becoming increasingly withdrawn, his eyes sunken and his skin pale. He barely spoke anymore, content instead to scribble notes in a journal that seemed to hold all the answers he sought. And as for me, I was just trying to survive. The words on the page seemed to be crawling off the page, seeping into my very soul like acid. I felt myself becoming detached from reality, like I was watching the world through a funhouse mirror. Every step I took felt like a betrayal, every word I spoke like a lie. And yet, I couldn't help but feel drawn to the void like a moth to a flame. It was as if the devourer was calling to me, whispering secrets in my ear that only I could hear. "Come closer," it seemed to say. "Come and see the truth." And so, with a sense of desperation that threatened to consume me whole, I took another step into the unknown. The lab was plunged into darkness, the only sound the soft hum of machinery and the gentle whisper of Dr. Rodriguez's voice. "We're almost there," she repeated, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly energy. The team huddled around her, their faces illuminated only by the faint glow of computer screens. It was as if we'd stepped into a nightmare world, one where the laws of reality no longer applied. The air was heavy with tension, the sense of impending doom palpable. Dr. Lee's eyes were sunken, his skin pale and clammy. He looked like he'd been living in a fever dream for weeks, his mind unraveling thread by thread. And I felt like I was staring into the abyss, my very soul being pulled apart by the forces of darkness that surrounded us. The words on the page seemed to be coming alive, crawling off the screen and wrapping themselves around my wrists like cold, dead fingers. "We're getting close, Doctor," Rodriguez whispered, her voice a seductive whisper in my ear. "Close to what?" I asked, but she just laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You'll see," she promised. And then, with a sudden jolt, the lights flickered back to life. The lab was bathed in an eerie glow, as if we'd stumbled into some sort of twisted heaven. But it was a lie, for in that moment I knew we were lost forever. The darkness had descended, and there was no escape. As we finally uncovered the dark secret behind the ancient text, our minds were met with a terror beyond comprehension. The devourer was not just a creature, it was a concept, a force of nature that had been unleashed upon the world, and we were the key to unlocking its power. The words on the page seemed to writhe and twist before us, like living serpents. We felt our minds expanding, our consciousness stretching to contain the eldritch horrors that lurked within. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes blazed with an otherworldly energy as she read from the text, her voice rising and falling in a maddening rhythm. "In the beginning," she intoned, "there was only darkness, and from this darkness the devourer was born." As she spoke, the lab around us began to distort and twist, like a funhouse mirror reflecting our deepest fears. We felt ourselves being drawn into the text, becoming one with the ancient words that had been hidden for so long. And then, in an instant, it was over. The text vanished, leaving us staring at each other in confusion. But we knew that we had unleashed a horror beyond comprehension upon the world. The devourer was real, and it was coming for us. We tried to flee, but it was too late. The darkness closed in around us like a shroud, and as the last remnants of light faded away, I knew that we were doomed. The final moment was one of pure terror. The devourer loomed over us, its presence filling the lab with an unspeakable horror. We screamed and screamed, but our voices were drowned out by the sound of our own minds shattering. And then there was nothing. The team faced their final confrontation with an otherworldly force that threatened to consume them. As the darkness closed in around us, I felt my mind slipping away, consumed by the void. And then I saw her, a figure from another world, one that defied all logic and reason. She was a being of pure energy, her form shifting and flowing like a liquid. Her eyes burned with an inner fire, a fire that seemed to pierce through my very soul. "You have unleashed the devourer upon the world," she declared, her voice like a symphony of angels and demons. "Now you must face its master." I stumbled forward, trying to find some semblance of courage in the face of this cosmic horror. But it was too late. The devourer had already claimed us, drawing our souls into its vortex of madness. As I looked around at my teammates, I saw that they were no more. They had been consumed by the void, their minds shattered by the eldritch horrors that lurked within. I was left alone, the last survivor of a team that had dared to unleash a power beyond human comprehension. And so, I faced the devourer now, my mind reeling from the implications of what we have unleashed upon the world. I am but a tiny speck in a universe that is vast and uncaring. The final confrontation has begun. Will I be able to find some semblance of peace, or will I succumb to the void? Only time will tell.